Okay, we are live. So today we've got the wonderful Jess, Sarah and Matt with us to discuss sourcing talent in a market that won't sit still. So we're going to chat for about 30 minutes and then we're going to move to Q&A. So if you've got any questions, comments, or anything else as we go through, just pop them in the comment section and we will go through them afterwards. We're also recording this session, so I will share the link with everybody afterwards as well. Okay, I think that's probably all I need to cover. So I'm going to hand over to Matt, who's going to be our wonderful host for the day.
Fantastic. Thank you, Laura. Well, good morning, everybody. Pleasure to be here for this webinar today. So my name's Matt Woodard. I am TA Director for a design consultancy based in Melbourne called Tory. And, you know, I also run the Melbourne Recruitment Meetup as well. So, you know, nice to virtually meet you all. So sourcing for me has been, you know, more recently, I think in the last few years, has become an even more important part of the sort of the overall recruitment toolkit, even more critical aspect if it wasn't before. So from both attraction to onboarding, recruitment marketing, branding, sourcing has just become such a hugely important element to get right. I was lucky enough to recently host the Sourcing Summit in Sydney, a fantastic event, and it was very clear that there continues to be challenges in the industry, but to combat them, a huge amount of innovation is happening too. So I'm really excited to hear our speakers, you know, talk today. So I will throw over to them to introduce themselves. Jess.
Awesome. So hi everyone, thank you for joining this morning. I always love these sorts of events that are put on for the recruitment industry and really helping us do more with what we've got in a very tough market, obviously preaching to the choir on that one. I have been in the recruitment industry for 17 years, so longer than I care to admit, and I think I look fairly aged and weathered from that 17 years. I'm currently the head of TA for Australia and New Zealand for Toll Group, a logistics company, and I've been there for almost 2 years now, and I'm also the global sourcing leader as well for Toll. And I've also got the Talent Sourcing Collective, my little side piece. So love sourcing. I've been in sourcing for probably, you know, more than 3/4 of that 17 years. I was with Matt at Sozu as well, and it's definitely the pulse of the market at the moment. So really keen to get into it and hopefully give you guys some things that you can walk away from. Sarah?
I will not be the person that doesn't unmute themselves, I promise. My name is Sarah Pfeiffer and I am the founder and director of a business called Invisible Partners. I created this business about 6 years ago now to help organisations to hire better for themselves internally. Essentially, we fall under the RPO umbrella, but we do an awful lot more of the diagnostic and kind of strategy work alongside the delivery of hiring outcomes. So in the last couple of years, where it's been insane for everyone in recruitment, both kind of champagne and broken glass, our bread and butter has been to help organisations that are really battling with finding talent to apply sourcing know-how and help them overcome that challenge. So I'm looking forward to sharing some of the gems that we've learned along the way.
It's funny you say champagne and razor blades. It certainly seems to be quite a common theme in recruitment, and you know, may continue to be so for the time being. But I'm sure everyone would agree to fantastically experienced, brilliant minds to talk through some key questions today. So, first question, Jess, if I'll put you in first. What sourcing strategies have you been seeing? Have been successful this year? What sourcing strategies have you found to be successful for you?
Gosh, what an easy question to start off with, Matt. Thanks for that at, 10 o'clock in the morning here in Sydney. Look, I want to preface this by saying I wish I had a silver bullet, and we were talking about this before we all jumped on when we spoke, kind of a week or so ago. If we all had a silver bullet, all of us would be cashing that shit in, because I think that there is so much turbulence in this talent market, and I don't think any of us have probably ever seen anything like this. Unemployment is the lowest it's ever been, even though it slightly increased last month. It is still sitting at a ridiculously low rate. Participation rates have increased as well, and so what we're seeing is that there's now no spare capacity in the market. I think Seek put that exact statement out a few weeks ago. So some of the sourcing channels for me that are gaining traction is really looking at the internal sourcing strategies. You know, with the fact that there's no spare capacity in the market, what I'm finding is that we are starting to all, you know, fish with the same bait in the same pond. But what we're also neglecting is our internal talent. And so what we need to do is look at opportunities for greater internal mobility. So one of the things I'm seeing increase is that the whole notion of talent marketplace. So, you know, what do you currently have in terms of an existing skills taxonomy internally? And then where do you need to develop that into? And how can you develop and form transient skill bases within your own existing organization? So I think that's kind of one thing. And I think the other thing still is the way we're showing up to the market. So yes, those traditional ways of sourcing are still working in terms of the various job channels that we use, LinkedIn, Seek, you know, all of those sort of Stack, all of those sorts of channels. But I think what has to pivot is the way that we engage. You know, I think you can teach a monkey to source. What you can't teach it is to connect. And so I still think that the focus needs to be on that connection. And we need to, as an industry, do better with that.
Fantastic. So really utilizing the power of the internal team, rather than just continue to be going to the market looking for more. It's fantastic. What about you, Sarah? What have you been finding has been successful for you and your clients?
I echo Jess's statement that there is no silver bullet. That the supply and demand is completely out of whack, but we're still finding huge success. And I'm sure Jess is the same with her team that was phenomenally successful. And the way that we're finding success is starting with the audience in mind. So the fundamentals. So yes, there's a whole truck of tech that you can apply to things, but you can't create more people in the market. What you can do is really understand what the drivers and the motivators are of the people you're trying to attract and build your campaign around that. And so teaching how to suck eggs here a little bit, but kind of just segmenting the sourcing strategies in the way that we think at Invisible Partners. You've got your proactive sourcing, your sort of headhunting kind of umbrella, your advertising component, and then your kind of your talent pool and nurturing of your pipeline. Every single one of those channels or sourcing mechanisms requires you to have your messaging on point. It requires you to have bloody good ad copy to get conversion in those things. And if you do that and speak with a human-centric tone rather than a company-centric tone, which I'd say there's still an 80-20 split where 80% of advertisements or messages or content marketing is all done with company-centric comms, which is so dry and so boring. And even in a buoyant market, doesn't really work. In a tough market, it just completely falls flat in its face. So I think the things that we're seeing working, Matt, to go back to your question, is really bloody good ad copy, well-conceived campaigns, and linking that internal mobility piece that Jess talked about, linking the internal successes and proposition to what the market might care about. So linking your campaigns to growth and success stories internally. So it's not just a straight ad, and there's a bit of thought around the content you're connecting your ad campaign to.
So has that change been from your perspective a result of the sort of talent, the shortage in the talent market? Has it been a consequence of COVID? Has it really just been a consequence of sort of a maturing sort of market and what candidates need or candidates want in order to be attractive?
I think it's becoming more important because the talent pool is smaller. So I think the conversion rates, the ability to convert the people that you do engage through well-conceived copy and comms and touch points, even human touch points being really meaningful and connected, it matters more than ever because you have 3 people to convert rather than 23 people. In previous numbers might be wrong, but you get the point. I think it hasn't changed. It's become more important.
Sure. Jess, anything to add?
Yeah, look, I think I kind of echo what Sarah's saying, that I think that connection and that conversion through that funnel is so critically important. And I think one thing I would say on that is that if people don't know what their current funnel conversion metrics look like, I would strongly encourage them to go and have a look now. I'm a massive believer in looking at conversion through the funnel, because that to me tells you a story of how effective your connection or your campaigns or your strategy has been. And that gives you the opportunity to pivot really quickly. I think sometimes in recruitment, we still have the legacy behavioral issues, or sometimes we're led by hiring managers to kind of say, well, okay, we'll run an advert for 2 weeks, we'll run it internal and external, we'll shortlist and we'll send you the best there is, then you'll interview kind of the top 3. And, it's quite antiquated, and it doesn't happen in this market anymore. So I do encourage recruiters, if they don't know what their current funnel looks like, and the conversion throughout that, and then what the narrative is behind that, what do you need to tweak? Is that you need, you're losing people from the top of the funnel to, for example, shortlist. What is that story telling you? Does that mean that the brief is not right aligned to the market in terms of what the market wants? If you're losing people at the stage of, from the conversion of shortlist to interview, why is that? So I would also encourage recruiters to be quite curious and ask quite curious questions around why things aren't landing, and test, pivot, iterate, learn quickly, and kind of keep going, because this market is moving so fast. You don't have the luxury to kind of wait anymore. So yeah, that's what I'd add.
Yeah, it's interesting. That seems to be a sort of recurring theme these days. It's data, really sort of, using it to tell the story and educate both yourself and your function, but also hiring managers as a result as well. So I guess, just reflecting on what you were both saying there, with obviously with COVID and obviously the challenges that we're facing, maybe continue to face with this candidate short market, there seems to be that innovation and that move to being much more candidate centric and really sort of creating a much more tailored approach. So do we think that's something that will continue as borders open again and there is more of an influx of people, and hopefully it will be a little bit less challenging to find talent? Do you think that will, do you think we've sort of pivoted now in a market where that will be the norm now?
Look, I think for me, my 2 cents on that is that the market is going to start equalising to a degree. I do think, though, we have left behind those previous markets where we've had a luxury of choice and employers have the ability to leverage their brand, for example, not put much thought into how they connect and the messaging behind that. Those days are gone for me. And thank goodness, quite honestly, because it's created a bit more of an even playing field for those of us that don't have those sorts of brands that resonate in the market. I think as borders open up, what it's going to start doing is yes, there's going to be an increased supply, but it won't negate the issue of the quality over quantity. It may relieve some of that pressure on salaries, which I think a lot of us would be quite relieved about, and certainly in sort of more of the technical spaces. It'll definitely relieve that, but I still think that the way we are needing to source at the moment and kind of putting that human centricity element and focus into the way that we source and connecting through to the right people, through the right channels with the right messaging, I think that's going to remain. Sarah, what do you think about that question?
Yeah, totally. I think it's the kind of human-centered focus is definitely going to be required no matter what. I think we're going to see a shift, though. I think we're going to, it's not going to be fields of gold, talent pools of gold any longer, but I do think we are going to see an adjustment around salary. I completely agree. And I think that's a large part because what we've seen in the last 2 years is organizations looking to kind of overreach to catch up on what ground was lost in the last couple of years. So organizations that are playing catch up and have done over the last 18 months. And that's what's seen this huge peak, amongst other things, in hiring. But there's so many global influences impacting us that are going to eventually impact us here in Australia. Economic influences primarily, and I don't think Australia is going to go into recession, but we're going to be affected by the ripple effect of other global markets going into recession. And we're going to see, unfortunately, and we have already started to see, particularly the tech space, an adjustment around those big teams that we've hired, and then, crikey, can't quite sustain that hiring level and that team that we've built. And we're going to see people let go, and we're going to see good talent coming back into the market, which is going to adjust salaries, like Jess mentioned. But I don't think it's going to completely overhaul the candidate-driven nature of our current state. So I think, quite rightly, candidates are now able to dictate their terms much more than ever before. I think it will equalise on salary, but not on every component of the employment proposition.
Fantastic, excellent. Just touching on the conversation around using data. A really good point from Kyle here about conversion tracking will tell the best story possible. Not always a pleasant story for everyone, but make sure it's hard data and not open to bias or effort barriers. That's a really good observation there. Okay, moving on. What big changes do you think we're going to be seeing in the next 12 months in terms of sourcing? Sarah, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I think we're already seeing it, but I think it's going to start to land is technology. And so technology is everywhere, it always has been. But I don't know if you guys would agree, but in the last couple of years, I suppose we've all had enough time at home to build new tech. It's going gangbusters. There's new tech being launched all the time. And I think the changes that we'll see actually land are more as a not an exception, but a rule where certain processes are going to be automated with AI-driven technology. I think that's going to become more of a norm and not just the exclusive domain of enterprise accounts, which typically it has been. And so the turf that I play in is generally small to medium-sized corporates. We are having those conversations now, and budgets or the costing of those technologies are now becoming much more approachable than they ever have been before. So I think the changes in talent specifically is going to be more automation of those low-level administrative tasks, which is going to be brilliant and improve efficiency. I still don't think it is the answer or the silver bullet, but I think it's going to help us be more efficient and more productive in the talent space. So I think tech primarily.
Yeah, I agree.
Right.
I think I'm loving the fact that there is a level of automation in some of the low level things in which we do, because again, what you can't replace is our ability to connect human to human, but you can automate some of the garbage that really slows us down. It impacts the ability to deliver that human to human connection. I think the other thing for me, and I talked a little bit about this at the Sourcing Summit a few weeks ago, was I do see that we're on almost the precipice of having a divergence in sourcing, kind of splitting out to having people that focus on the candidate side of sourcing, so kind of the how-to, the finding the names and the engaging, but I do still see a massive shift and a rise on things like talent intelligence and talent insights, and kind of really putting the analytics within the sourcing sphere. Which I'm really excited about, because I do think that we do sit on huge amounts of data here in sourcing. We're quite lucky that way, but I do think there's an opportunity for us to get a little bit more closer to that and really understand and kind of, again, evolve into more of an analyst type role. You know, what's the data we sit on? What's it saying to us? What are the analytics and insights we can draw from that? What's the narrative? And then how do we then serve that up to the business in a really proactive way as the decisions are being made? So, you know, one of the four faces I talked about for sourcing at Sozu was the talent strategist and talent analyst. Those two faces for me are super critical. That's where I see the evolution of sourcing going for me over probably the next 18 to 24 months, Matt.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I think even in the last sort of 18, 24 months previously, I think there's been a very obvious shift in terms of what a function of a sourcer does and will do. As I sort of mentioned at the top there, it's not just your entry level role to becoming a recruiter and doing more now, is it? It's a very, very much dedicated and really specialized profession that we're seeing there. And it's more than just finding people. It's talent attraction, it's recruitment marketing, it's actually market mapping, all the talent insights that you sort of mentioned there as well, Jess. It's such a hugely critical role, which just seems to be getting more traction, getting more people sort of focused on it as a profession rather than a stepping stone, which is critical. Sarah, do you have a view?
Yeah, I just think it's so exciting. It's approaching the market like we're consumers, right? So if we were in the market to buy a car and you know, preaching to the converted here, I know all of a sudden our algorithms and Google that's listening would serve us heaps of content to ensure that we're buying the kind of car that they want us to buy. Approaching the talent market as an understanding of propensity to change jobs more than just your kind of basic levers that we see on LinkedIn Recruiter. The technology that's coming out in that space is phenomenal. I've been particularly excited by the technology called Candidate ID out of the UK, which is brilliant, and it does exactly that. What you talked about, Jess, is that kind of talent intelligence piece, which is so game changing, I think. And what I'll be curious about, because again, I think there's a role segmentation around enterprise and what happens in enterprise world and what budgets can extend to versus what happens in small to medium-sized corporates, which is my domain. What can be applicable in that environment, and we talked about this offline in our prep call, what can stop the reliance on LinkedIn Recruiter, which is such a monopoly and so expensive? How can we offer different things and get to the same goal by understanding our talent better through technology like Candidate ID and many others, I'm sure.
Mm-hmm. I think it's a good point, actually, because, some of these sorts of calls are great if you're an organisation that has got massive amounts of budgets, or you are in a really big organisation with a large TA team. Now, a lot of us don't have that luxury at the moment. We're kind of the sorts of functions that just need to cover cost. We're not profit centres. We just need to break even. And so there's not always a lot of budget for really strong, campaigns or, marketing or technology. And so I think the biggest thing that, we were talking about in our prep call, to your point, Sarah, last week, was that if you are an organisation that doesn't have a massive budget, you still have the ability to source. You still have the ability to create really strong human-centred campaigns that resonate with your candidate market. As long as you know what you're selling, you need to know your EVP, you need to know what the benefits of your organisation are, and then how do you then take that out to the candidate market in a way that resonates, and that's why I love platforms like Video My Job. It's such a basic thought process, videoing someone with your phone, and showing what a day in the life of an employee looks like, and then posting that out to your market to go, hey, do you want to work here? But that's the kind of shit that lands really well because it's authentic, it's real, you don't need a big budget, it's quick, it's easy. So I would just encourage anyone that's on the call that thinks, look, I'm not in an organisation that has the big brand or has the big team or the big budget, that there's still stuff that you can do to penetrate your markets really, really effectively.
It's really interesting, actually, when we were talking about that, the word that sort of springs up for me is authenticity. I think there's such an opportunity for organizations, big and small, to really sort of bring the inside out. And certainly the way that we live our lives and the way that we work these days, that's what people want, their ability to have that better work-life balance. And I think if they can see it more within an organization, they can obviously picture themselves there, which obviously helps with the attraction piece for sure. Now, obviously, we are still sort of, we are finding ourselves in a bit of a challenging market. Do you any view from either of you around where we might see more challenge over the next sort of couple of years?
That's a really hard one because I wish that, I had a crystal ball. I kind of skipped that in my degree. Unfortunately, that unit would have been really handy. Look, I still think it's going to come down to what connects with the candidate. That's going to be the challenge, is how do you take your brand authentically out to market? I think one thing is finding the talent, and yes, you need to have the ability or the kind of the technology or the techniques to be able to find the talent. That's one piece of it. So I still think the challenges are going to be there. I think that people are going to start moving away from the major platforms like LinkedIn. And we have seen a bit of that. We've seen the demographics on platforms like that significantly change over the last probably sort of 2 to 3 years. But I also still think it's going to be about that connection. How do you then identify what your value proposition is? And it's a candidate value proposition. It's not an an EVP rather anymore. It's a CVP. So how do you craft a really compelling CVP, take that out to market so that it lands? Because candidates are still going to have the upper hand for a while. So how do you make them buy into you as an organisation as opposed to your competitors? Sarah, what do you think?
Crazy. There we go. I agree with all of that. Don't you love tech when it works? I agree with all of that. I think to kind of backtrack a little bit to some of the things that we've seen work, which will respond to the current climate, which isn't going to change anytime soon. And in the next 3 to 6 months, I think it will remain tough. So I completely agree with you, Jess. To be a bit more rudimentary around what we're finding works to kind of overcome some of those challenges, and less tech oriented and more around where do your tribe hang out. So being really, really clever with the channels you use and not just thinking about talent channels. We do an awful lot of recruitment with really diverse businesses that have quite dispersed workforces in really regional locations that are really underpopulated. And so we infiltrate Facebook community groups and make friends and meet talent where they're actually at to fill really obscure roles in Mackay and Gimpy, and do that really successfully by, again, using really, really good foundational copywriting skills and making sure we're meaningful to the talent that we're trying to attract. So it's being really, really clever about where do your tribe hang out, what messaging is authentic and clear around your own proposition, and then human-centered, as we talked about before, and laboured. And I think to the question again around what we're going to see challenging in the next 3 to 6 months, I think it will be really interesting, those organisations that have invested in their employer brand, when a lot of us have been quite transactional in the nature of, it's been really tough, let's just run more. Those organisations that have actually chosen to invest in their employer brand and to do some of that strategic work now, I think we will see them really flourish in the next 2 years. I think it'll be really interesting to see evidence of those that have invested themselves from an employer branding perspective and that strategy work done now.
I think off the back of that,
fantastic.
Sarah, before we move on to the next one, sorry, Matt, we haven't talked about talent pipelining and building communities. And, I do think that is an offshoot of EVP or CVP work. Those organisations, to Sarah's point, that have been really strategic and proactive and use this market as an opportunity to continue to slowly build, identify who the right talent is and leverage their technology to build those really active, highly engaged communities of people, so that when the market changes, they've already got that foundation of relationship and engagement in play. I do think that will also provide an opportunity for those organisations to get further ahead, because as we know in recruitment, it's too late to leverage a relationship when you need it if you don't have it in play already. So any organisations that are even doing a basic level of talent pipelining, talent community builds, I also think will be in good stead as the market starts to shift again.
Awesome. Yeah, really good point, Jess. It kind of leads me on to my next question around sort of how you're managing that sort of that messaging and the expectation with the business. Obviously, as most companies seeming to be at the moment, everyone's in sort of high growth mode, and obviously everyone wants the best talent, etc. But how are you sort of tempering that with the business in the market is incredibly competitive. One of my team showed me a stats on Friday last week around I think 3/4 of all designers have changed jobs in the last 12 months, which kind of blew my mind. But it really sort of tells the story around the level of competition that we are facing in the market. So from a sort of internal perspective, with either your business, Jess, or with your clients, Sarah, how are you managing the messaging with them around sort of tempering expectations around hiring?
I'll shoot, because I think it's so important, isn't it, that everyone's on the same page. I think if it's a hiring manager that hasn't been in the market for a while, it's helping them understand that hiring in 2015 and hiring in 2022 is going to look and feel incredibly different. And so I think it's just about setting the stall and bringing them on that journey, as cliche as that sounds, to help them understand the supply-demand challenge, making no assumptions about what they know. So labouring that point around it's not just rhetoric. Here are the stats and the data to prove the challenge that we're facing right now. I look like I'm frozen, so I don't know if I've frozen for everyone else. Have I? I'm good. I shall just keep talking. Excellent. So I think
good.
Setting the stall out for hiring managers around current state and helping them get to the same page that you're at, and helping them understand what that looks like from a recruitment process. So holding on for a comparison is not a good use of your time. Short lists of 6 is not going to happen. Let's look at, if you've got 2, let's celebrate with a party. So I think it's just really being quite intentional around what does the current state look like, and how does that change your recruitment experience as a hiring manager. So that's partly it. I think the second point is going to town with understanding what's required in that brief, and really helping to challenge ingrained thinking around the must-haves in a role to help capture adjunct skill base and transferable skills. The way that I do that is with data, and I'm sure Jess sounds like you're a data queen as well, so I'm sure you do the same. And it's a bit like what you were talking about with the pipeline piece and the sort of assessing what points of your pipeline are converting and otherwise. It's using data to identify who are your top performers, what pathway did they come come from, and invariably it's not the must-have pathway that the hiring manager is looking for. So it's helping to challenge their ingrained thinking by, hey, your top performer was a farmer before they were a ABC. Let's challenge our thinking about what's actually needed from an attribute and quality perspective, versus they must come from this pathway and go to this university, and all of the ridiculous wish lists that sometimes people come in with their rigid thinking. So I think it's opening up the talent pools by challenging must-have lists, and also getting them with the program around current state.
So have you found, before we jump in, have you found there's been that mindset shift and that sort of change because of those conversations?
It depends how ingrained the thinking is in the individual, but I think data helps. So I think if you're just saying, oh, you've got to be more open, let's look at diverse skill backgrounds to solve that particular talent hiring problem, that's probably not going to cut it. If you've got a data point in your business with somebody who's come from an adjunct background, that really helps to influence that ingrained thinking. So it helps in 80% of the cases, I'd say.
Awesome. I think for Toll, look, it's and I think this is just, not even in my own organization. It's just consulting, it's advising, it's influencing. It's all of those skills that we need to have as talent professionals that are going to have longevity in this market. It's moving away from the transactional order taking. And that can be really, really tough depending on the maturity curve your organisation is sitting within in terms of their TA structure and their TA model. So it's being able to, look at, to Sarah's point, I love this so much, challenge the brief. If you have a supply issue, to me, there's kind of three main issues that talent can kind of fall in. It's either supply, demand, or brand, and kind of identify where you fall within that. What can you influence, with your hiring manager at any point in time? Is it that you need to challenge the brief and increase the supply? Is it you need to go out to market if you have a brand challenge, with EVP or kind of messaging? If it's demand, is it things that you can control in terms of salary? Can you pivot internally with a business case to show where the market is in terms of the salary points? I think that there are things that we can do as talent professionals, instead of just sit there and say, yes, Mr. Hiring Manager, how much would you like me to jump and how high? As Sarah said, the market has changed so much from 2015 to 2022 and beyond that we need to help the hiring managers understand what the current market conditions are. They aren't recruiters, we are. They're not the talent SMEs, we are. So we have to leverage what we have in front of us, which is, again, and I know data is becoming a bit of a dirty word, but it really is using the information we have in front of us, whether that's anecdotal candidate feedback as you're screening your candidates. If they're saying something about either the role, about the salary, about your organisation, you have a responsibility to feed that back internally and help and educate the hiring manager. I also think that part of that brief is that we keep talking about the perfect candidate. I want the purple squirrel that can, the top hat on that can moonwalk backwards. Mate, that's dead and buried. That's never going to happen. So what can you have? If you can't have this skill, what can you have? If you can't have that level of seniority, what can you have? So I think a lot of the time it's just being able to show them that, pull the curtain back from recruitment. I still think that there are some parts of recruitment where we like to keep a closed door to and not show the hiring managers what we do and bring them along the journey with us. Pull the curtain back, invite them in and go, how would you like me to sell your opportunity? If you were coming into my organisation, why would you join? Why did you join in the first place? Why do you stay? Who are your connections? Who can we leverage in your networks to help us recruit this role? So I think that for me is probably something that we can actively do today, is leveraging those sorts of skills and attributes that we've got in play already.
Fantastic. Both great points from both of you. Now, who in the industry at the moment is kind of doing some really good things? Who do you sort of look to as sort of leaders or sort of sources of knowledge? To go first, at Sourcing Summit, I have a bit of a professional crush on Marcel van der Meer now. If anybody wants to go and check out his stuff, he's unbelievable. Really, really good. And I know Denise from my team here, she's really big fan of Ballox Proxy as well. She's talking at the Sourcing Summit in Amsterdam tomorrow. So Jess, Sarah, who do you sort of look to for your advice? Who's kind of, not that I like to use, it's a dirty word, data as well as thought leader. But who do you sort of look to for sort of innovation in space?
Yeah. Look, I think thought leader is such a naff term, but I still love it. So let's go with it. So there's probably three for me. So Vanessa Ruth is one of them. So Van presented at the Sourcing Summit, and I love her thinking. I love her technical nous. She's a sourcing trainer. For those of you that have never heard of her, I encourage you, please follow her. She does some crazy stuff like being able to source using emojis. And the room was so silent because I think people sitting there just going, Mike Cohen is also another one. I've got a bit of a fangirl crush on him too. He's someone that just does some absolute crazy shit with technology, and I'm so in awe of what he does and the stuff that he builds. And I think Hung Lee is another one. You know, I still am a massive fan of Hung's work. I think, you know, the newsletters that come out and just the content he puts out there is very cool too. Sarah?
I think I'm pretty interested in Adam Gordon out of Scotland. I think it might be a bias that I have. He's the person that's kind of authored the candidate ID technology that I referred to earlier, and I just think it's so clever and overdue that we start to think about data like that and have this kind of propensity to make decisions extracted from our data. So Adam's a bit of a leading light in that space that I'm actually meeting him for the first time next week, so I'm really excited about that. I took my own advice and just reached out and made a connection, which is great. And also she's a friend, but I think she's amazing, is Amy Schultz from Canva. I think what she's doing in Canva, which is an amazing brand to represent, I think she's doing some really cool things there too.
Fantastic. Well, leading on to Matt, I'm always interested in learning about what tools and things people are using in their day-to-day. I think at Sourcing Summit it became very clear that LinkedIn is now being referred to Jess as the Blue Devil. So all the sourcing presenters and leaders sort of seem to refer to it that, because there's different and potentially better ways of sourcing for candidates rather than just sort of relying on your traditional sort of LinkedIn. So there's a load of different tools. We're at Tory here. We're trialing a few at the moment to try and sort of enhance our capability, but keen to understand what maybe Jess, what you've got a bit bigger budget than us, what you're doing at Toll, and Sarah, I guess with your different clients, what you might be recommending there as well.
Yeah, look, and we need to preface that Blue Devil joke. We love our friends at LinkedIn, by the way. I'm still a massive fan. In saying that, look, we do love you guys at LinkedIn. Please don't slash my budget. But I do think that though there is some other things that are coming out there that are very, very cool. So I've actually really embraced Zoom Info at the moment, mainly for our European and US markets. I think that is something that I still leverage a lot, and I always really encourage anyone to look into. I'm also looking at Eightfold AI. I think that's something that I'm really curious to learn more about and really understand more about as I continue to kind of evaluate our tech stack internally. But it's still things like, you know, Stack. If you are a tech recruiter in this market that is not on Stack, you are dead. You know, you need to get onto that kind of stuff. You don't need a massive budget. And I would say, though, the one free thing that you can do is learn how to X-ray search. It doesn't matter what budget you have, doesn't matter what technology you have. If you can X-ray search, hit me up if you don't know how to do that after. I can show you how to do that. Please learn how to X-ray search, because it can cut through the noise, it can cut through the tech. You can still find talent without having the budget to actually have the technology. Sarah?
Awesome tips. Thanks, Jess. I will totally hit you up to do that because I don't know how to do X-ray search. So yeah, every day is a skill day. We are currently in conversations with a platform called Paradox, which I'm in two minds about. I think the proposition, they basically it's chatbot recruitment. So it's the initial sort of screening and evaluation stage of basic criteria being met, then feeding into a funnel that connects with
Olivia,
human.
right?
Pardon?
That's Olivia, isn't it?
Yes, yeah, exactly. And so I think for some of our retail clients, which really, really high volume, low touch, kind of getting into a more meaningful process with a human eventually, I think it's got its place. So we're exploring that just now, which is cool. And I think I think I should be on commission for Candidate ID, but Candidate ID I've mentioned a couple of times around that whole kind of talent intelligence piece. And then there's another platform that we're currently exploring on behalf of one of our clients called Yellow, which is a pipeline and nurturing function. Again, overlays onto LinkedIn and helps you to get more meaning from the pipelines that you're creating, get more kind of intelligence from it. So I think there's so many tools. I think it's just keep on top of them and making sure that it's, because I think, like I said before, technology is amazing and it's got some fantastic leverage, but it doesn't create more talent. It just allows you to cut through and be more intelligent with how you access your data. So I think it doesn't forego the stuff that we were talking about to start with around the fundamentals.
No, it's a really good point. I think absolutely. LinkedIn Recruiter has its algorithm and sort of surfaces certain people for certain reasons, but there are different tools which can do it in slightly different ways. I think Noel in the chat there, recruiting.net, Recruitum, it's a free tool and it's a really, really good tool. Often use that to find different solutions and different candidates. So that's definitely one to look at as a sort of free option. And just a message there, a mention there by Humera about the Full Stack Recruiter book by Jan Tez as well. I've heard that. I haven't had a chance to read it, but I hear really good things about it as well. Fantastic. Well, look, we're kind of near the end of the discussion. It's gone so quick, but just as a bit of a wrap up, before LJ jumps in with some questions. Jess, Sarah, any sort of final thoughts? Any sort of parting wisdom you'd like to share with the audience?
I think for me, it would just be to keep drawing on resilience. I know as recruiters, we're incredibly burnt out over the last couple of years, and I think that it's been a really, really hard market, and I don't think we'll see a market like this certainly for quite some time, if ever. I think focus on the things that are in your control, focus on how you can connect with your candidates and actually firstly know who your true candidate is, and just keep going, keep trying new things. You don't always have to have a massive budget and latest and greatest tech to be really impactful. So just focus on what you can control.
Yeah, absolutely. Sarah.
Wise words. I would also echo that, and I'd say that candidate care, really good candidate care, goes such a long way. And yes, you can use technology to support that and be smart around the touch points, but just doing what you say you're going to do. Like it really doesn't, it's not more complicated than that, and just making sure that's intrinsically celebrated and measured in your team as well. So it's not just all around the kind of aggressive fill rates. There's actually a candidate care component, because that supports the, you might have the fanciest employer brand. If you actually don't live up to the hype, then it very much falls by the wayside.
Absolutely fantastic. Well, thank you both so much. I can see from the chat that some real nuggets of wisdom were dropped there. So absolutely great job. LJ, did we have any questions?
Yeah, so Noel's got one. I'll pop on screen now. So what is the best way to connect with the masses? Is it still a well-crafted EVP? Given the next company may also have a similar EVP and feel, the low number of direct applications is just a sign of the market. There's a few more comments, but I guess I know we've touched on EVP a couple of times, and Sarah mentioned a few things about content, which I want to touch on later because I love a bit of well-crafted content. But I wonder if there's anything else you guys had to say on that.
I think if it depends whether Noel's talking about the masses as a talent pool. So let's assume that he is, that there's a talent pool that he's trying to keep in contact with and keep relevant with. I think it's like any good, LJ, you'll agree with this, I'm sure. It's like any good content plan. You're giving more than you're asking for. So if you're just feeding content through with job alerts, then you're going to die a pretty quick death in terms of the engagement of that connection with your masses. I think it's about how can you help them? How can you solve problems for them? How can you lean into the things that they care about and making sure that you're serving content that's relevant to them? And then, of course, littering it with once a quarter, a job alert or something that might be an ask or a call to action. So I just think it's about balancing, the original point that I made when we started the conversation. What's your audience driven by? Who are your audience? What do they care about? What problems are they interested in solving as it relates to their career? And how can you serve them content that's going to be stimulating and interesting and relevant alongside some intermittent calls to action?
Yeah, I think it used to be, I think it was a Marketo piece of information years ago, and it was like that you need to give 4 pieces of value before you ask anybody to do anything. And I think just bearing that kind of ratio in mind when you're putting content out. Okay. I think everything else was just comments as we went through, but some great comments. But that was it for questions, unless anyone else has got anything now. Awesome. Cool. Thank you guys so much for today. Really, really appreciate it. You've all been amazing.
Thanks, LJ. Thanks, Matt. Thanks, Sarah. It was fun. Hopefully people got some stuff out of this.
And
I certainly did.